Hey there, everyone. Ervin here, and today we're breaking down the Illuminate's weaknesses and stats in Helldivers 2. Now that we've had some time to study this new enemy, we've been able, with the help of the Ministry of Science, to deduce the exacts behind the anatomy of our new enemies and really lock in on what makes them tick. It's hatred for our way of life, of course, but beyond that, we're going to be talking about all of the finite details you've come to love: how much health they have, how their armor works, how much damage they deal, and how to defend against it. And of course, what major breakpoints can we exploit to take them down the most efficiently? We'll be answering all this and more, and there's a lot to cover, so let's get started. First, we're going to break down the Illuminate's chaff units, the Voteless. Once proud democratic citizens of Super Earth, their freedom has been stolen by the squids and replaced with something terrible: anti freedom. The weak minded individuals lacking the democratic spirit to combat the squid's mind controlling powers come in three variants, and you can tell which ones you're shooting based on how mutated and disgusting they look compared to a normal happy go lucky super citizen. All three variants have the exact same movement speed and deal 25 melee damage per swing. The lowest amount of damage of any enemy in the entire game, as even the scavengers on the Terminid front deal 40 base damage. Their attacks only cause a light flinch as well, which, coupled with this absurdly low damage, means we are only ever threatened by the Voteless in large numbers, or when we decide to get a bit too invested in beating them to death with the new melee weapons. Getting into their stats, the lightest voteless unit has 40 head health, 50 arm health, 80 leg health, and 100 main health, with all of their limbs except their body immune to explosive damage to keep explosives from dealing damage multiple times. The medium sized voteless has 50 head health, 50 arm health, 80 leg health, and 130 main health, also known as the torso. The heavy voteless, with the most undemocratic looking appearance, has 60 head health, 65 arm health, 80 leg health, and 160 main health. If the voteless loses their head, that's lights out straight up. But should they lose any limbs or have their main health pool reduced to zero, things get a bit more interesting with their anatomy. You see, all their three variants actually have 100 more main health, but when the initial pool is reduced to zero, or they lose a limb, they all begin to lose 5 health per second via a bleed out effect. This 5 damage per second is subtracted from whatever remains of the main health pool in addition to the 100 extra bleed out health. Basically, as soon as you've either struck the voteless with 100 to 160 damage to the torso, depending on which variant you're dealing with, the voteless is guaranteed to die via bleed out if you swap targets and simply wait them out. The same thing is true should you start lopping their limbs off, most notably exploiting their weak knees only having 80 HP, which just so happens to be the amount that allows you to buzzsaw their legs out from under them in single hits from the MG43, Tenderizer, and so on. Once the voteless have been crippled, you can swap targets knowing they'll bleed out and die eventually, saving you ammo and making you overall more combat effective. Now, like I said, this enemy is arguably the most pathetic individually out of all of the enemies of Super Earth, so there are so many effective ways of disposing of them. But I have to give credit to our flamethrower weaponry as likely the best in the business at disposing of Voteless. You see, our flamer weapons all cause the burning ground effect, which lasts for 15 seconds. And the burning status deals 50 damage per second for 3 seconds, reapplying infinitely as long as the enemy stays within the source of the fire. This means any voteless spending more than a singular second within a wall of fire is guaranteed to burn out and die, not having enough health to survive the burning status, plus entering the bleed out status. Add on the fact that we're fighting in narrow streets that we can easily wall off with flames, and you can see why this has quickly become my favorite way of handling hordes. But like I said, tons of ways to deal with these guys. They're incredibly weak, but also incredibly satisfying to put down in droves. Let me know your favorite methods of removing the vote list down below in the comments. That is going to bring us to the next most prevalent Illuminate enemy, the Overseer. Not quite a leader of the Illuminate, as the Elders have yet to show their ugly faces in the Second Galactic War, instead, sending these lieutenant esque enemies to do their dirty work and lead the voteless around like undemocratic cattle. The Overseers, who didn't have the social credit for a jetpack, deal 40 ballistic damage and 70 explosive damage per shot from their staffs. and can whoop our Helldivers' asses with those sticks for 75 damage per swing. The jetpacking overseers instead have burst fire rifles, dealing 35 damage per impact, which is still extremely low, only proving fatal should a lightly armored Helldiver eat an entire volley at once, as well as high explosive grenades that deal a fatal amount of damage at point blank, assuming you're not wearing a suit of explosive resistant armor, or just more than an armor rating of about 129. Their damage overall is pretty low when compared to other factions' elites, with any Helldiver, no matter their armor rating, able to shrug off at least one hit before needing to pop a stim from every weapon beyond the grenades. But the Illuminates are, at least currently without the rest of their roster, a threat through their great numbers and not so much their damage. What they lack in damage, the Overseers also make up for in health pools and the way their armor functions, proving quite tanky if you don't know what weapons they're most vulnerable against. Their heads are encased in medium level 3 armor, but are fatal weak points for weapons like the anti material rifle or big iron. The jetpack on the elevated overseers is also a very significant weak spot, having only 300 health, but a lower armor rating than the head at only AC2. Losing the jetpack proves instantly fatal for the overseer. Going forward, these two enemy variants are exactly the same though, with 300 arm health transferring only 50% of the damage it receives to main health, 857 leg health transferring 70% of the damage they receive to the main health pool, proving fatal should either leg be destroyed, and 600 main health, also known as the torso, which altogether is a lot of straight up health pool. Although none of these parts have any armor at all. But that's where things get interesting. The overseers are covered head to toe in ablative armor plating. These plates only transfer 20% of the damage they receive to the main health pool and are level 2 armor, also known as light armor. The arms and legs have armored plates with 100 HP, and the chest a plate sporting 150 HP. This already makes this enemy significantly more tanky, but what you'll likely notice, especially when utilizing extremely heavy ordnance against them, is these plates are capable of soaking any individual hit, no matter how strong, from ballistic damage. Allowing, for example, the chest plate with only 150 HP to completely soak a shell from the new ATE, which deals 1300 damage by nullifying that further 1150 damage entirely. This makes it impossible to one shot overseers no matter how high the damage anywhere outside of the jetpack and the head regions, as the plates will always soak at least one instance of damage. That is, unless we pierce or permeate through this armor. While high DPS, high RPM options are good answers to the Overseer, like the assault rifles and machine gun class, we have a couple other very significant contenders for Overseer elimination: explosive weaponry and fire based weaponry. Flamethrowers pierce right through these plates, dealing damage to the main body as well as the plates that cover them, and any limbs inside all at once, resulting in some instant calamari. And explosive weaponry, although the plates and limbs are immune to explosives, deal damage directly to the main health pool, making weapons like the Plasma Scorcher, Purifier, and Crossbow, just to name a few, very consistent at eliminating overseers by basically ignoring those armored plates, flash frying their bodies within, as well as basically ignoring their feeble energy shields when they put them up, as the explosions permeate right through the shield, their armor, and directly into the body. In summary, either eliminate overseers through medium penetrating or heavy penetrating headshots or jetpack shots, drill their main body with high RPM, high DPS machine guns and assault rifles, flash fry them with fire weaponry, or blow them up with explosives and plasma weaponry for the most consistent results when dispatching these squid faced freaks from our galaxy. Okay, that was a lot to take in, so let's talk about a more simple enemy, the Watcher. This little drone is the only enemy currently capable of calling in the Illuminate's reinforcements and dropships through the blue flares it launches roughly a second after entering combat. They also change the scanning light from blue to purple if they've been alerted to a potential hostile presence before beginning to search for the cause of the disturbance. Their weapon is basically a short range taser that deals only 30 damage, but stuns the recipient, causing your stamina to be drained and forcing you into a slow walking animation for a few seconds. On its own, this will basically never prove fatal to a Helldiver, but Being zapped by one of these things in the middle of a swarm can prove fatal. Despite the low damage, it also feels necessary to mention the arc resistant armor does reduce that measly 30 damage down to just 1 damage after rounding, making them virtually harmless damage wise. As for their anatomy, they have 600 main health, but it'll very rarely be a relevant way these enemies are dispatched, as the eye has 300 health, the top fin 200 health, and the side fins 150 health. Losing any of these pieces is a fatal injury, causing the watcher to fall to the ground and die, making this an extremely easily dispatched foe, besides their high mobility and airborne nature. But a necessary one to dispatch quickly due to the threat of it calling reinforcements. Speaking of reinforcements, let's talk about their flying saucers. These ships sport some crazy armor that you'd think they would have deployed on their harvesters, covering it in Class 5 armored plates. The plates covering the sides of the ship have 1000 health and transfer only 5% of the damage they receive to the main health pool, just like the Overseers. These plates will soak any amount of damage in a single instance, no matter how high. So if you fire a recoilless launcher into it, that doesn't mean that extra 2200 damage is connecting with its main health through the plate. The plate explodes, making the inner 3500 main health vulnerable, but that's all you get. Instead, firing into the warp port on the bottom of the ship allows you to skip these plates and damage the separate warp port health pool of 2500. That is fatal to the ship should it be destroyed, although you do need anti tank weaponry to do so. That means when firing on the warp port specifically, your best anti squid ship options are going to be a recoilless launcher, which is just one hit to the port, the commando launcher, which can destroy them in 3 hits to the port, or my new personal favorite, the AT emplacement, capable of destroying them in just 2 shots to the port. Any other launchers are going to take too many shots or too long, allowing the dropship to let its occupants loose onto the battlefield. In most games, I don't think it's worth worrying about the dropships, as it's not practical to carry around anti tank weaponry that's only really necessary for shelling their ships. But activating a SAM site does absolutely trivialize enemy squid reinforcements, and bringing the AT emplacement to rocket defense operations is just hilariously unfair for the squids. Having a couple Helldivers on these emplacements makes it nearly impossible for any of their forces to even touch the ground, and turns this mission into a game of Jenga with all the dropship corpses stacking up miles high into the air. Now let's go over their structures. The warp ships found within their outposts have some specifics to them that we've yet to see in any other enemy outposts previously. First off, they have a very strong shield generator, able to soak up to 2500 damage before leaving the spawner vulnerable, regenerating 250 of this shield per second, and the shield itself is immune to explosive damage, meaning you're going to want to break it open with ballistic damage. After the ship is made vulnerable, any explosive with 20 or more demolition force through the door will destroy the spawner. But fused explosives like the HE frag and gas grenades will not detonate the spawner on one of the doors on each spawner. Fuseless explosives like the crossbow bolts, impacts, or autocannon will always detonate the spawner no matter which door you fire into. This is likely a bug and will be fixed in the future. When it comes to destroying the spawner through ordnance, there are several options, but basically anything with 50 demolition force can get the job done without even bothering to drop the shield. A direct impact from the orbital precision strike or gas strike fits the bill here. The orbital laser can also destroy entire bases worth of these, and the 500 kg will even get the job done as long as the shield is down upon landing. Otherwise, it's a little bit inconsistent. What's important is anything you couldn't use to destroy a detector tower isn't going to work against these, so no airstrike, no strafing runs, and so on. These require heavy ordnance to destroy. Otherwise, you got to get up close and personal with the methods previously mentioned. If their spawners weren't enough of a pain in the ass, the Tesla towers they litter their bases with deal huge bursts of damage that'll prove devastating to any Helldiver in lighter armor or without arc resistant armor. Thankfully, these do have a minor windup before firing and will not fire on you as long as you are prone. So if you accidentally stumble into range of one of these things, be sure to hit the deck. They also do not have a health pool. These are destroyed purely through demolition force, requiring an impact grenade, grenade pistol shot, crossbow bolt, eruptor shot, or something larger, making them very inconvenient should your loadout not include a personal explosive weapon to take these out with. All right, it is now time to talk about the harvester, although I prefer to call them tripods as they don't seem to really be harvesting anything. The tripod, when in combat, deploys a 1500 health shield that, unlike the warp ship's shield, is not immune to explosive damage, meaning we can drop it with any high DPS weapons quite easily. What's not so easy to deal with is its damage potential. The harvester, when firing on a Helldiver anywhere beyond 20 meters, fires a giant eye laser that deals an absurd 1800 damage per second, on top of lighting the target on fire for a further 50 damage per second. Basically, if you're hit with this laser, it doesn't matter what armor you're in. You are cooked if you're hit for anything beyond a microsecond. The damage type dealt is also, for all intents and purposes, non elemental and non explosive, meaning there is no armor passive that can reduce the damage this laser deals beyond your standard armor value, vitality booster, and experimental infusion. Basically, just do not get hit by this thing, or it's lights out. The attack that you can do something about, however, is the arc throwing attack it launches when you're within close proximity. This lightning damage is reduced by arc resistant armor by 95%, making you basically invincible to it, although you will still be stunned momentarily when not wearing arc resistant armor. You'll be tossed to the ground and take an extremely high 60 base damage per arc that hits you. And as it fires 3 prongs of lightning, this is very likely to instantly slay you unless you are not hit by all 3 or wearing heavy armor. So those weapons sure are deadly on the harvester, but how do we most effectively bring it down, and what's its anatomy looking like? Well, it can be crowd controlled hilariously, unable to act by any weapon with 30 or more staggering force in similar fashion to the automaton devastators for starters. The horn on its head is also the source of its shield. So if you destroy its 350 health pool with class 3 armor, it'll be unable to raise its shields any longer. The blue glowing eye, though, is bait. Despite only having 350 health and transferring 120% of the damage it receives to its main health, destroying this eye will not KO the tripod. The outer shell of the tripod itself is also something you really don't want to contend with. Each portion having 800 health, class 4 armor, 75% durability, as well as only transferring 5% of the damage it receives to the main health, making it virtually pointless to invest ammo into. Now, although you can just keep pumping damage into the main body and eye region of the harvester, and it will eventually bring it down through its 3000 HP main health pool, this really isn't at all worth it compared to aiming for the leg joints connecting to the main body. This region only has 1000 health, level 3 armor, and 25% durability, making it extremely vulnerable to all medium penetrating and heavy penetrating weapons, as well as one shot kill for anti tank weaponry, as losing a leg proves fatal for the harvester. While you would expect that glowing blue eye to be the point to aim for, as it turns out, that can be further from the truth. Also worth mentioning that the entire body, besides the main health pool, is completely immune to explosive damage, so only ballistic damage will be applied when targeting the leg joints, making options like the crossbow and plasma weapons much less effective than they would be otherwise, although they can still eventually get the job done. That does it for my breakdown of the Illuminates. I fully expect many more of their units to make their way into our galaxy in the following months once their armada is prepared to invade in full and we are no longer just fighting off this vanguard force. As soon as the new Illuminate reinforcements arrive to the game, you can count on it that I'll be among the first to document all of their weaknesses, stats, and weapons in a follow up video. But until then, I hope this video helped you out and gave you some insight into this all new enemy we'll be contending with for the foreseeable future. Thank you to my coffee supporters for helping to keep the channel going, and thank you for watching till the end. I'll see you next time. Something made it to the ground. Good for them.
Never mind, they all stopped shooting at it, they are already died.
Oh god.
Well, you got your wish.